What is it, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crowded Lake, and today we're reading Chapter 22 of A Lesson in Practicality by ResidentAnchor on AO3. If you'd like to support the author or the fic itself, do so with the links in the description below. With that being said, here's Chapter 22, Desperation. He had been right there behind Roman, peering around him and looking at his friends in the strange room. He had seen Roman walk in and make demands, eyeing each person carefully while being completely on guard. He had taken a step back for a moment just to calm his heart and gather himself. He was still a mess from his outburst earlier on the stage, and his frantic heartbeat hadn't calmed down from Roman's actions. He had seen the creature chasing after two as the others' panicked faces as they turned to run off wouldn't leave his thoughts. All this led up to what had happened now, and Virgil blamed himself for every second of it. He hadn't noticed the growing noise of static until the last second, turning around to see the creature just a moment too late. He hadn't even had a moment to prepare before he was forced to be frozen in place and unbreathing, completely still as it settled uncomfortably, causing the punding pressure ringing in his skull. The creature had the perfect opportunity, and Virgil had basically handed himself over without a fight. Patton had explained the brief experience he had remembered, and all he mentioned was a headache and nothing but static, but there was so much, and it was so loud he couldn't think as he kept growing louder and louder, and unknowingly, Virgil's eyes watched those in front of him with a spring in his step and a smirk on his face. There they were, the only people in the city even worth the monster's time, it had seemed. Humans were fragile creatures, and the monster had learned to be delicate if it wanted to keep what it had. They reached up and ran a hand through his hair, pushing it out of their face so they could see properly. They never understood half the things humans did, like purposefully impairing their vision for no reason. They walked in slowly, looking up at Roman first, who had turned around halfway, hand starting to fall to his side, and sparks vanished as realization had begun to set in on his face. Roman's jaw had started to drop in disbelief and had frozen just before the thought had fully set in. He was the most loud of the group, and the creature didn't need to know what he was capable of. The oaf had pretty much announced himself to the whole city about his power. It's what attracted the creature to him in the first place, really. Though, there were still other options laid out for him. They walked around Roman as their eyes on the next person and searched their current host for a name. Logan had seemed panicked, as if he had realized what would happen. An arm stretched out beside him and attempted to cover the confused and oblivious man standing behind him. Virgil's memories weren't necessary for that one. They had learned more than enough about Patton from experience, and while the man was interesting, he wasn't the one they were really after. No, that would be the one in the back. The one leaning up against the wall, watching carefully and trying to distance himself from the front door as if he could help hide him from the dangers that lurked beyond. Virgil found his feet carefully moving past Logan and Patton, eyes entirely focused on Thomas. Each one had their strengths, but the potential this one carried caused the creature to shiver in eagerness. Another puff of smoke trailing from his current host's mouth, Virgil's body shivering involuntarily along with it. They watched the other carefully and frowned a bit at what they saw. Thomas was brave for trying to stand up with the others with next to nothing to defend himself. Well, still obviously afraid, but his initial reaction had been to run away. Not ideal at all, but the potential that lied beyond was incredible. They wouldn't have to choose between any of them if this one could just take everything the others had to offer. They reached out and grabbed the man's face carefully as to not nudge him out of place and break free from time. Inspecting him closely, they smirked at what they had seen and made a decision. They took a breath, and the smoke increased as the monsters slivered their way out, being careful as they planned to start time just as they hopped out into their new host. Otherwise, the creature would be stuck frozen in time, their new body, which would serve no good. As Thomas himself was unsure how most of his abilities even worked, Virgil's memory showed that Thomas hadn't really gotten a hang of anything, specifically, so they wanted to be careful, just in case. They had stopped and blinked as an important thought, a memory Virgil had, quickly flashed through his head as the creature felt his hands warm up on the frozen man's face. Before they could even react, Thomas fell forward into the other, reaching out and grabbing Virgil's arms to catch himself from falling. Thomas gasped and panted as he evened out his breathing before looking up, watching the confused face grow with anger and sneer down at him. The black wisps of smoke still escaping him. He jumped back in fear and found him against the wall once more, staring as Virgil watched him closely. Thomas watched as Virgil's face started to smile back at him and slowly reach out to him once more. So, that's how it works, He muttered to himself. Thomas jumped back and pushed himself into the corner of the room to keep as much distance as possible. Stay back. Don't come any closer. Oh? Virgil's head tilted to the side as he watched him. What will you do if I don't listen? Taking one step closer, Thomas looked past him at the frozen forms of all his friends. He looked over and saw where he had broken free before, looking back at the advancing form of Virgil. Well, I can't... The panic seemed to settle as Thomas got an idea, smirking a bit awkwardly at the other. Well, that's pretty obvious. Thomas squeezed his eyes shut, and Virgil jumped forward as if it knew what he had been thinking. Time started, and everyone stumbled to the side, Virgil falling into the wall and giving Thomas the opportunity to run by and stand by the others. Everyone turned as Virgil adjusted himself, smoke finally vanishing from his breaths, turning and looking at the others. Pedden stood by Logan, who stepped up with Thomas, Roman standing right behind them and face uncomfortably indifferent. Well, this is a warm welcome, he sneered back, obviously upset by the change of plans. Get out! Roman pushed the others out of the way, sparks jumping off of his shoulders and down his arms. Get out, now! Oh, you seem upset, Ro. Virgil chuckled and stuck his hands in his hoodie pockets as if nothing was wrong. He hunched over, taking the posture Virgil usually did in normal situations. Was it something I said? Instead of giving him an answer, Roman growled and advanced, reaching out and grabbing Virgil's hoodie, pulling him close. I've chased you away before. Don't doubt I won't do it again. Virgil blinked, and suddenly his face changed to one of fear. Reaching up and grabbing his hood, being careful of Roman's overcharged hands. Ro, wait, it's me. Please let go, please. He closed his eyes and shook his head. Stop. Don't hurt me. Please. I promise it's me. Just please. Roman quickly dropped him and took a step back, suddenly fearful of his actions. Virgil stumbled back and caught himself, laughter filling the room. Is that all it takes? Pathetic. He dusted himself off before looking up at the others. You think just because I'm in a corner means I'm trapped? But you forget that I'm not locked in here with you. You're all stuck with me, and I'm not letting any of you go without a fight. Logan took a step forward and put a hand on Roman's shoulder, giving it a comforting squeeze. What is your plan, then? What do you plan on doing once you have what you want? His eyes almost glowed with his power, but he dared not use it, not sure if he could help or harm Virgil if he did. Plan? He held his hands up and motioned around the room. I want power, and here it is. There is no plan. I don't really need one. What I want is power, and I'm going to take as much of it as I can. He looked down and held his hoodie open, pulling it away from himself as if disgusted by the sight of it. Virgil here is useless. So much power, and he doesn't want it. All I want to do is go home and shower and He dropped his arms to his side. Right. I guess can't do that anyway. Oops. Oh well. Logan watched curiously before speaking up. Wait. You want what Virgil wants? You physically feel what your host desires? Is that why you don't want Virgil? Because he doesn't want his power? Why you didn't want Patton? Huh? Patton squeaked at the mention of his name. Why didn't he want me? Well, what do you like to do, Patton? Logan muttered quietly. You love helping people, and it just wants to take. You wouldn't like that. Ergo, it doesn't want someone as kind-hearted as you. Oh, that would be so sweet if I wasn't absolutely terrified. So, now what? Roman spoke up, standing up taller and glaring down the possessed man in front of them. If you don't want Virgil, let him go. I'm not an idiot, Roman. I'm not going to give up my hostage without getting anything in return. Everyone froze at the news. Oh, what? You must realize the danger isn't past. You forget that I can burrow myself in here. Virgil tapped a finger on his head a few times. The mind is so powerful and yet so feeble. You're all weak. It could be so easy and so quick you wouldn't even feel it. Well, he might feel it. I can't always be too kind. You wouldn't do that, Thomas shouted. That's your only leverage. Virgil's shoulders shook with laughter. And you have it all wrong. His grin grew even more. I didn't just jump around for fun, although that is why I decided to play around with you all. I easily could have taken you out one by one, but where's the fun in that? I'm finally free in a world where I can do whatever I desire. I learned a few things in my short time here. For example, kick the pilot out of the seat and things get a lot cozier for me. He tapped on his head once more for emphasis. No, Roman screamed out in panic. No, you can't do that. Oh, I could, but why would I want to when there are more comfortable options right here before me? So, that's it then. Logan looked at the ground as he tensed up. You take one of us and make a break for it? Not my initial plan, but yeah. Virgil's eyes landed on Thomas. I was hoping to run a few tests. See what some of you were truly capable of, but I'll count my losses and go. I'm feeling rather generous, so here's my one and only offer. One of you give in, and I let the rest of you go. I'll even leave the city so you'll never see me again. He shrugged a bit. There were this many of you in one city. I'm sure there are others out there. Patton took a step back and hugged himself, not comfortable with the idea at all. He rubbed his hands down his arms as he shivered at the thought. Logan and Roman caught each other's glances of panic, and Thomas was frozen, shaking his head as he thought to himself. He then looked over at Logan, and the other caught his glance. Oh, too hard of a choice to make, I see, Virgil tapped a finger on his chin as he looked at the others. Logan, so curious and smart. I wouldn't mind walking around with a mind to seek out more knowledge. Oh, and Roman, so brave, so driven to be the center of attention. That sounds rather nice, too. What about you, Thomas? Cowardly and yet Something keeps bringing you back. They all sat silently, uncomfortable, listening to them before Thomas turned back to the others, whispering and unsure of himself. What if... No! Patton jumped up, walking up, but not daring to take a step past Logan. No negotiating. No one is agreeing to this. Patton, I could... No! I'm not letting you do this. That's final... In a flash of light, two ran out and grabbed Thomas, pulling him into a hug and staring Virgil down. No one else. No more. Please, I can't. Two held on a bit tighter at Patton's words. Thomas didn't fight back, but he looked over at Logan once more before sighing. Fine. I'm sorry, Pat. He reached up and hugged Two back, realizing the only reason Two had come out was that Patton was no doubt afraid of stepping any closer himself. Two slowly let go and slid off of Thomas before pulling away, looking at Virgil the entire time. Well, that was simply touching. I think I might cry. Virgil scoffed and watched the others. If I have to settle for this one, then I guess I will. He motioned to himself, staring back down at his current host. No, wait. Logan took a step forward, and Two turned around, fear across his face. I'll do it. No, you will not. Patton reached out and grabbed his arm, pulling back as hard as he could muster. Logan turned and stared Patton down, not willing to back off. He tugged his arm free as Patton's face fell. No, Logan, you can't. I'm sorry, Patton, but I'm not willing to stand by and watch Virgil die while I could have done something about it. Oh, he thinks he's being noble, Virgil called out. Is this because you made Virgil promise to go back in time and stop me if things turned south? Trying to save all your friends? Logan watched on, fist clenching as he grit his teeth. Oh, didn't think I knew that. Of course I have access to all of his memories. How do you think I learned about you all in the first place? I only knew how many of you there were because of my time with Patton. Oh, sorry. It was 3, wasn't it? The uncomfortable energy in the air grew thicker at the words from the creature. Don't worry. It's not like I can possibly do anything to stop that from happening after I let him go. You don't hurt Virgil or any of the others, Logan called out quickly. Agree to my terms, and we have a deal. You leave them all alone and leave town immediately. This is ridiculous. You can't listen to it, Thomas cried out. We can't trust it will follow through with its word. Oh, and what are you going to do if I don't? Virgil turned to Thomas, sending him a challenging glare. The only thing you've managed to do when I've been around is turn and run away. He took a step closer and watched Thomas scurry away just as fast. See? Cowardly. He turned his attention back to Logan. Fine then. I agree to those terms. All right then. No! Two called out, standing in between them. Enough of this! Logan wasted no time as he reached out and grabbed Two by the arm, turning and using the momentum to throw him back to Patton. They stumbled back, and in a flash of light, Patton fell back onto the stack of boxes, scattering them about before falling on the floor. Logan turned back and saw Roman racing over to help him as he faced Virgil once more. Go ahead, then. Without further prompting, Virgil's head flew back and the creature shot out into the air, wasting no time and heading right for Logan. He closed his eyes and embraced himself, pulling his arms in close as he hugged himself in a moment of fear. He gasped as a force hit him, causing him to stagger backward and hit the wall behind him before looking back up and blinking at the sight that lay before him. Thomas stood where he had just been, the smoke swirling around him before vanishing completely, gripping his head and attempting to stand properly. Thomas shook his head a few times, and Logan looked past him at Virgil, who lay motionless on the ground where he once stood. His eyes quickly flashed up, back to Thomas. No, Thomas, what did you do? Thomas blinked and turned around, watching Logan carefully. Well, good thing I didn't keep my promise since you couldn't keep yours. He smiled and looked down at Logan as he pushed himself up from the wall. Sorry about your friend, by the way. Verge? Patton called out, sitting upon the floor with help from Roman. Virgil? Roman shot up and ran across the room, ignoring Thomas, who stood there, his eyes never leaving Logan. Roman fell to his knees and placed his head on Virgil's chest, freezing and listening for any sound. He waited impatiently before sitting up and staring down the other. No. Virgil. No. Damn it! Roman rubbed his hands together and sparks started to fly out. You're not dying on me like this. Thomas took a step closer to Logan as he looked up and watched the man approach, listening to Roman's attempts to revive their friend in vain. So what? You're just going to kill us off one by one then? Logan whispered, though he felt his words were much louder than they actually were. What if it doesn't work? You take our abilities, but they don't last forever. What will you do then? That's why I have 2 backup test subjects sitting behind me, Logan. Come on. I thought you were supposed to be the smart one. Come on, Virgil! Roman let out another set of sparks as he blinked away his tears. Patton watched on, a hand over his mouth as he shut his eyes and sat there hopelessly. He looked over at Logan and Thomas and tried to get up, but his legs refused to listen. He looked back and forth between turning away, not wanting to see what would happen next. Verge, please! Roman's voice broke as he called out, sending one last shock of sparks. The room lit up before they fizzled out and Roman fell forward. No. No. He held his head in his hands as he finally gave up. Damn it. Why? Logan looked up at Thomas as he suddenly stopped his advance, a frown forming on his face. He watched Logan closely, the frown slowly growing as seconds ticked by. Logan watched, almost amused, as the panic on Thomas's face finally started to set in. What? Hey! Thomas looked over his shoulder to see Roman pushing himself up off the floor. His eyes filled with tears and his teeth bared with rage. I'm not done with you, he growled out, eyes red and tear tracks down his face. He took a big step over Virgil and marched right over to Thomas, angry sparks shooting off of him and down his arms once more. Logan pulled himself together in a burst of energy and emotion and stood up, eyes glowing gold with power. To think we would just sit here and let this happen without a fight would have been foolish of you. Thomas spun around, eyes wide with shock as he froze up. No, you wouldn't. A look of realization as he had found the memory within Thomas, one just a few hours before, when they were alone in the apartment. A plan they had thought of, a promise to one another to follow through if it had come down to it. Thomas and I made a promise just in case this very scenario happened, and I fully intend on seeing through with it. Roman caught on to what was happening and grabbed Thomas around the middle, making sure his arms were covered and no skin contact was made. He had Thomas's arms pinned to his side as he linked his fingers together and held a firm grip on the other. I was hoping to be the victim, but I commend his bravery. Thank you, Thomas. What are you going to do? Patton whimpered from the floor. He wiped his eyes and started to stand shakily, ready to do anything to help now that his legs had once again started to listen to him. Thomas swallowed in fear and watched on helplessly. He's going to wipe my memory as far as he can until there's nothing left. Thomas squirmed and fought in Roman's arms, but was no match physically for the other. You'll leave him as good as dead. You realize that, right? You leave him an empty husk. I won't be able to control him, but you're signing his death certificate. Better than leaving him actually dead. Logan's eyes flashed brighter and started bleeding into a bright blue color as Thomas cried out in pain. He knew what this meant, and he jumped in with no hesitation. He is far braver than you give him credit for. Roman closed his eyes and turned his head away, making sure he never let go of the man in his arms. Eventually, Thomas stopped fighting and slumped over as Logan's eyes flashed brighter and brighter, completely shining blue. Suddenly, it stopped, and he blinked as the light diminished completely back to normal. Roman looked over and let go of the man in the arms, carefully bringing him to the floor before backing off. Smoke slowly appeared, staggering out into the open air. Patton gasped and covered his mouth once more as the creature struggled to do much of anything. Quick, we need to get rid of it. Roman looked around the room and picked up a box Patton had knocked over, dumping out its contents onto the floor and turning back to the creature. It ate through metal last time you did this. That won't work, Logan called out as he started to panic. Roman approached as it ascended into the air, holding the box up to catch it. It's weak, and we just need to hold it long enough to get rid of it. But we can't create a portal, Logan cried out in panic. Both Thomas and Virgil are... Roman swung down and trapped the creature in the box, closing it quickly and spinning it around. You ready, Virg? No one would notice when time froze, or when Virgil broke free by rolling over and groaning into the floor, reaching up and grabbing his chest with both hands and head resting against the floor, panting for breath. They would miss when he threw his head back and pushed himself up, eyeing the box in Roman's hands carefully. They wouldn't see when he reached up and grabbed it, shaking as the creature hissed with static as it tried to break free, but still too weak to do so. Virgil wasted no time in turning and walking over to his portal that lay on the floor before dropping it through as it vanished. They would, however, see him standing there and falling to his knees as time started once more. Roman ran over and grabbed him before he fell forward, pulling Virgil into his arms as the other groaned and winced in pain. Virgil! Patton cried out, this time the tears happily welcomed as he got up and made his way over. Oh my goodness, he's alive! Yeah, I managed to get his heart starting and no one noticed. He just told me to grab the thing and he'd get rid of it. Roman laughed and pulled Virgil in closer. It was stupid. You're in terrible shape. You're lucky we were desperate. Yeah. Virgil looked up with a grimace. I know brave, but stupid is usually your thing, but I wanted to give it a try. Roman couldn't be mad at his words as he laughed and rocked Virgil back and forth in his arms, turning to Logan. Thomas was rolled over onto his back, and Logan held his head in his hands. His eyes flashed brightly once again, turning blue as he focused on the task at hand. Lo? Patton called out, but the room grew quiet as Logan put all his effort and energy onto Thomas. Can you change him back? Is he going to be okay? The storage room was silent as everyone turned to Logan and watching him carefully. Minutes passed as he worked, his eyes continuing to emit a bright blue glow as they watched the unconscious man on the floor. Suddenly, Thomas grimaced and groaned in pain, causing Logan to back off as he watched the man on the floor blink and look up at him. His eyes were glassy and unfocused as he slowly pushed himself off the floor. Logan reached out, still careful about skin contact at the moment, and helped Thomas off the floor. They both stood, and Thomas leaned on him for support before looking at the others. What's going on? Where am I? Thomas? Patton called out, standing up and walking closer. Thomas, are you okay? What do you remember? Thomas looked at them all and slowly shifted his gaze from each, slowly, before looking back at Patton. He shook his head and watched Patton closely. Who are you? Thank you so much for listening. What a wrap up to the big bad. But what's going to happen to Thomas? If you want to find out, subscribe and hit that bell, for another episode is coming out tomorrow. That's right. The day after today, unless you're watching this after the day it's been uploaded, in which it is already up, I'd assume. Indubitably. Thank you so much for listening, and much like the gang trying to fight the freaking black smoke blob, do your best.